Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today is June the 10th and we are still here at Big Bend National Park. There's some parts of this trip that are completely unusual. One of the facts that is unusual is that this campground has a gigantic shade tree, and so that makes it so that I can enjoy this campsite pretty much all day long. And that is significantly different from many of the other campgrounds, even the ones that have the canopy where you can kind of, set up an easy chair under the canopy and try to enjoy your time in the shade while the variety of insects sometimes do their best to try and prevent you from enjoying that. So if you're able to have a tent in the shade so that you can duck out of those busy experiences, if you're trying to enjoy a little bit more solitude and a little, let's call it creature comfort for both yourself and also for any of the creatures that might have been buzzing you, because who knows how many of those might have become casualties. Now, today, I spent a good amount of time just enjoying the solitude in the desert. It's the weekend here in the national park, and so there are quite a few people out and about. But if you walk off of the basic pavement in almost any direction, as long as you're not on a heavily trafficked trail, generally you'll be all alone. And so that's what I ended up doing. I picked a route and walked out into the desert, and I was using my TrackBack feature to ensure that I didn't just walk out into the desert and never find my way back out again. It was pretty interesting. At a certain distance, I could tell that people hadn't been there in a very, very long time. I even found a battery. Imagine this. It was a C or D cell size battery, pretty large. I think it was a C sized battery, but as large as it was, I actually think it could be a D. The battery's casing had pretty much turned all into black, and so I couldn't tell who the battery was made by. I just knew that it was an old battery that had been left behind eons ago, and I was trying to think of what could probably necessitate something with that caliber battery, and I thought maybe a lantern of some sort, maybe a flashlight, when flashlights use those big giant batteries, and when that was the standard flashlight that we would carry out into a place like that. There's no telling. What I could tell is that that battery was right in front of this unusual little cave entrance that I wouldn't have found if I wasn't walking around in the middle of the desert. So oftentimes I can find unique places like that that allow me to spend some time enjoying a cool recovery period whenever the sun is blazing hot out there. And today it definitely cranked up the heat in terms of what the sun was doing, and I believe it reached the 90s today, and the forecast for the next several days is going to be in the low 100s. So having a shade tree at this site is number 30, is a massive upgrade compared to most of the other sites. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all peaches and cream. There are some things to be aware of in terms of where your site is located. To get down into this site, there is a series of steps. And the steps in themselves are not any kind of a difficulty, but basically your campground is just slightly less level than what the roadway level is. And so anytime cars drive through this loop, their headlights directly illuminate your tent. And it's a very it's kind of unnerving because the cars are driving straight towards you, and it would just take one errant off-road adventurer to to drive down the to navigate through the steps and also the other tree, and And that's kind of how it feels every time the lights are fixated on your tent when you're asleep, especially when it happens in the middle of the night. And that's the main reason why one of my favorite sites is site number 1, because I sometimes do drive away during the nighttime hours and I come back and I feel like, shining my lights on every tent that I pass by has to be giving some kind of a disservice to the people who came here to experience nature and solitude. So, just some little things to discuss. But site number 30 has been magnificent. It gave me some time to have some pleasant sleep for the most part, because the temperatures under this shade tree are considerably cooler throughout the entire spectrum of the daytime and nighttime. And so it's been quite a treat to have this space here, especially with the situations that have been occurring weather-wise. For each of the past few nights, it's been raining, and you can hear the wind picking up right now, almost on cue. These situations are mitigated somewhat because there's, again, a shade tree. If I had a smaller tent with me, I could have set up on an even lower level, which would require me to walk downhill a little bit more every day, and then of course uphill a little bit more every day. But with the smaller tent in that area that's just a little bit lower, perhaps I would be able to also get away with not having car lights shining onto my tent at various hours of the night. That's just a thought, and I'm just naming details in case you're considering staying in Site 30. One of the other things I want to cover again is that yesterday, on June the 9th, I was performing a long run based on a suggested workout for the long run option on the smartwatch that I was wearing, and that led me to pick one of my favorite places, the Burrow Springs Road. It's almost like I'm going to this place to get some Burrow Springs upgrades, and I kind of feel like it. The longer I run on that road, the longer I feel like, I can run just like a burro. I can trot along at any, distance, as long as I haven't, depleted my level of hydration or what have you. But I went out to this locale and started my run, and I was running from the far end of the road, which is basically a parking lot at the end, that leads to a trailhead to the upper, the Burrow Springs pour-off. And from that point where I parked, I just took off running at a very low speed, really, because I was trying to stay in a heart rate zone that was being specified by the training device that I was wearing. So it made it so that I could run really far. I ended up going 9.32 miles, something like that, and that's pretty far. Now, during this particular stretch, because I was trying to maintain my low heart rate, the hills are something I didn't run completely. In many cases, I would actually have to walk to keep my heart rate low. And I was doing really great at that. And then all of a sudden, as I was basically running this one stretch of road that passed by a lot of brush, suddenly in the brush, I could see something, and then the thing I was seeing could tell that I could see it, and that's when it decided to go in another direction. And it turns out that it was a black bear, and the black bear had seen that I was able to see it. It was looking directly at me, and it was facing in a way that I think that it was going to charge out of the brush. Maybe it thought that it had some kind of a deer, or maybe some kind of other injured animal running through the desert at a super slow speed. And maybe because of how slow I was running, the bear thought, this is easy prey. Because the moment that the bear saw that I could see it, it snorted. It made this noise that only a large body blowing out air through its compressed nostrils can make a sound like. And that sound was pretty ominous. And it turned around and took off running. And so the first thing I thought was, I think I need to stop my watch. And then I thought, well, there might be a reason I don't want to stop it just yet. So I went to go grab my phone, which was in my right pocket. So I moved to grab my phone, which I'm recording this with. And by the time my sweaty digits could cause the phone to actually start recording, this bear had already booked it quite a distance across the desert, and it was basically flooring it to get away from me. Whereas before, it was waiting right in that precise area for me to get to it, and it was what it seemed to be staging a potential ambush. And to me, that only makes sense because it was moving from the mountainous area where there's a lot more food into the desert area where there's a lot less food, and it was just following the basic pockets of water that it probably could smell throughout the area. And there is a spring there called Burrow Spring that I'm sure was flush with water, and that's because of all the recent rainfall that has occurred while I've been here. I don't know what's been happening beforehand, but it was pretty green beforehand. And I also don't know if you can hear, it sounds like a generator is running, and also the wind speed is picking back up. There are a lot of different noises going on in addition to that bird that's just maybe begging for food right now. But all of these sounds are constant in this campground. So whether you're at a site with a shade tree, or whether you're at the first site where basically you're not going to be bothering anyone coming in or out, or even if you're at the very last site, I believe it's in the 50s, 58, 59, something like that. Even if you're in the last site, you can hear things like this generator, and then the air horns, and then the honking whenever the park hosts are hazing bears out of this area. The other day I was able to talk with someone, a local, who was telling me that it took a long time for the people in charge to understand that there was a situation going on with the bears here, and that it took quite an unusual amount of time to try and figure out the right thing to do for the animals that were coming here for the shade and for the respite from the summertime heat. And so only at that point in time, which was, according to what was told to me, a considerable amount of time, that's basically how the situation stayed. Was people left everything as it was without thinking about it. So here's this generator running, and here I am talking about how during August of last year I was here, and myself and a master naturalist were very vocal when it came to talking to the park hosts about why they needed to close the campgrounds. And I did take enough video, which if you backtrack through the catalog of videos here, and all of that video showed that the bears that were circling these campgrounds and staying at these campgrounds were acting in an unusual manner. So yesterday when I saw that bear stalking, or seemingly stalking me and potentially going to ambush me, that was unusual behavior. The bears that I've seen throughout this park have always they've been wary of people, and as they hear you approach, they'll do a number of different things, but they don't allow a surprise to occur unless they're trying to surprise you. And so maybe in this particular case, I met a lone bear, and this loner bear always wanted to remain anonymous, and maybe it just happened to be that it was approaching that brushy area maybe minutes before I got there, and it thought, oh, I'll be safe here, and I don't know that road is going to run right by me, and I don't know that I'm setting up right here in a place where I'm going to be right next to that person. Maybe that bear didn't do anything to potentially stalk me, and maybe for anyone who's been in that area, maybe it somehow just snuck across the entire desert while I was running and looking in its direction to begin with. So when you really look at the details of that video, and when you really think about how long it took for me to pull my phone out and how long my sweaty digits took to activate the phone, and as you saw how fast that bear was running in that clip, then you might start to think, wow, that bear really did come from right where this guy was going to be. He was in the middle of nowhere, and there would have been nobody to back me up in terms of if something had happened right then. And it was already turning out to be a pretty hot morning. And so imagine if this bear had jumped out of the brush and just even briefly attacked me and caused me any kind of trauma. Now, to get back to my vehicle would have taken quite an act of well, it would have taken an act of commitment, because if I had lost any blood between where the bear encountered me and my vehicle, which was definitely over 1.25 miles to 1.5 miles away, then at the rate that I was trotting along at my slow run, 1 mile would be at the minimum about 16 minutes. So it would take at least 16 minutes of superhuman capabilities to, after having somehow rendered the bear neutral, to have made it all the way back to my vehicle in time to get back into it and then drive all the way back to some other place to get help. So the point that I'm trying to make is I was in the middle of nowhere with nothing that could potentially have helped in that situation. I wasn't carrying any kind of a weapon. I wasn't in any way physically superior to that bear. In fact, when the bear took off running, all I could think was, wow, it's maintained that pace for all of that distance. And for me to run it at a pretty fast clip like that, that would have taken quite an effort. And then to keep maintaining that for all that huge distance, the bear probably had a natural ability to do that. Plus, it also had something in it called instinct, a survival instinct. As soon as it recognized that I wasn't its typical prey, as soon as it saw and recognized that I could see it, as soon as it saw that I wasn't prey, it knew that it had to go in a different direction. The Big Bend bears are typically vegetarian. They normally don't eat meat. And so only on rare occasion have I ever seen the bears here eating meat. And I think that they were predating the mountain lion kills of deer, because I don't know that a bear would normally just catch a deer successfully over and over, unless it was a truly amazing ambush hunter, which the bear that was in the brush could have been. Because for it to be waiting there for as long as it took for me to recognize that this huge black shadow in the brush was something other than just the shadows of the brush, that bear was a really good ambush hunter, or it could have been. But thankfully, for whatever reason, that bear didn't want to follow through with whatever it had been thinking at that point prior to it seeing that I could see it. Once it saw that I could see it, again, the bear exhaled through its nostrils, kind of like a snort, made this noise, and then it just turned around and ran away from me. Whereas all of that time that I was slow running up to that point, it knew I was there, and it wasn't trying to get away from me at all. It was trying to let me get very close to it. This bear that I got to interact with yesterday, that was one of the closest encounters that I've had with some of these bears here. And I've had a lot of close encounters with bears in this particular national park. The bears here are different from the things that you would see and experience in a place like Yellowstone National Park, where they might have a lot more, a lot of a wider variety of prey to choose from, in addition to their fruits, whatever they eat from the land, the berries, I should say, and fruits, whatever it is they're eating. The bears here have a very scant diet in most cases, and the biggest primary threat to these bears' survival is to find its own, or find at least a shared source of water that it can draw from. So right now, while it's been raining throughout this region regularly, there are tinajas, and there are also just different springs throughout this desert that lead all the way down to additionally watered areas like, well, the Rio Grande, for an example. And that's basically where the bear was headed. It was headed kind of towards Santa Elena Canyon from the Chisos Mountains. So for anyone who's familiar with this park, these names are going to make a little bit of logic to you. For anyone who's not familiar with this information, the Big Bend region is gigantic, and past Santa Elena Canyon, a little bit more, I guess, towards the southwest is the Big Bend Ranch State Park, and there are black bears there too. They're just not as common because they apparently had to have originally migrated when the bears were remigrating or repopulating the Big Bend National Park. So with all of these things in mind, bears are just one of those species that you are aware of in this park. Not everyone gets to see them, and not everyone gets to see them up close, and not everyone gets to potentially be ambushed by one and not lose their stuff. I didn't lose my mind. I saw it. I didn't just jump back and start running. I didn't yell out or yelp out in surprise. I saw what I knew I could have encountered there, and I was completely at ease with whatever was about to happen, and I was ready to defend myself as best I could against something that I have never encountered in life. So, all of that in mind, if you saw that video yesterday, you also saw all kinds of weird stuff, like a lizard jumping up on the cactus and eating a stick bug. You got to see a raven flying with something in its beak. You got to see a rattlesnake. You got to see the beautiful sunset. What I don't know if you got to see was that right now I'm on the lower echelon of having an adequate number of subscribers on this channel. So if you could click on the subscribe and the thumbs up, if you could click on those two links, and maybe even just click on the comments area and type something about, hey, I really liked this type of content that you're providing, but not that type of content. Or, hey, I really like it when you add this kind of thing into the video, but I didn't like when you add this kind of thing into the video. All of this criticism is constructive, and I appreciate it. I know that I deserve my fair share of critiquing because I definitely in the past have dealt it out, and I try to make sure it's constructive. That's the only thing. And I do know that some people just want to have an outlet and an event, a place to vent. If that's what this is for you, go ahead and vent. You can use the comments area for that. I think that YouTube itself does its own little job of policing the ferocity with which you're venting. So at least try to keep it to a nice little slow simmer if you're going to try to burn anybody. But do keep in mind that a lot of times when we're trying to burn someone, it's because we see something that we ourselves don't like about ourselves. So if there's something that you really don't like, do yourself a favor and ask at least the question, well, how would I do it if I was recording this segment and trying to talk about the same things? Like on this channel, we do talk about wellness and conservation. And because I'm talking about wellness and conservation and how they go hand in hand, and how if we're not well, we can't usually take care of the things that are around us, when I talk about those things, I try to incorporate those into all of the details that you're hearing on this video. So if you hear some songs that talk about certain things, like if it's going to be plastic or cash, for an example, and it's talking about plastic and one-time use things, then maybe at least critique that in a way where you can say, well, I like the idea of what you're talking about, but I don't like how you sing it, or I like how you play this song, but I don't like the idea at all because it talks too much about plastic. If there's something that makes sense, this channel really could use a boost to the membership. Right now, as of the recording of this video, there are 385 subscribers. Thank you so much. If you know anything about Big Bend, you should at least know that the highway that comes into this park is called US 385, and that's also a website that I've registered. It's us385.com, where if you go to that website, you can see some of the topics that I guess you would call it a blog, an online log of some sort, And it's also, I wanted to call it a vlog because I also have a video link, but the video link post, it basically points you right back to this channel. So the video link from us385.com just goes in a circle and points you to this platform. This platform, I thought, has been one of the more useful platforms of all of the places that I've been able to see information shared, because someone can talk about what it is that's going through their conceptual mind with elements such as video from a circumstance that has occurred. And because we're able to do that on a channel like this, where you have such a diverse array of viewership, you can get everything from A to Z, but in the mix, you're going to have people that are able to say, hey, I've noticed that these things are different as well. And this is how I'm noticing it change in the wildlife and or vegetation in my area. And once we're able to discuss these types of things without becoming disgusted at them, then we'll also be able to talk about, I've also noticed a higher success rate of certain types of species of animals doing this, that, or the other. The plants that are prolific are this, that, or the other. And everything shy of discussing, like for an example, where the pockets of wildlife are. In this particular video, when I talked about the bear, well, the bear can live throughout the entire desert. But if I was talking throughout the entire ecosystem here, it just needs to, of course, have the basic resources that will allow it to get by. If I were talking about something that was less common, like very specific, and maybe even regionally borderline extinct or endangered, maybe I wouldn't want to give away the location of that particular thing that I'm noticing in terms of population increases or declines because of whatever reason, you know, whether it's poaching or whether it's people just wanting to see. You know, one of the things I've noticed since my youth transition to adulthood is there are many adults who have suddenly decided to get on board with getting a camera and getting all this camera gear and continuing to stay in the loop with all of the software and all of the things that it takes to continue to take that picture. But the pictures that are being taken are in many times just cluttering up even the viewership opportunities. Sometimes I'll see so many people in line to take a picture of something without recognizing all the children that can't, you know, see over the shoulders of all these adults who are showing how to see, how to seize the day, how to take an image, and how to share that with somebody. I've seen a wall of photographers basically come between a mother grizzly bear and her cubs. These are the type of things that are happening in nature right now. And if we can't see that it's easier sometimes to find even the park trail volunteers passing up the garbage on the trail, if we can't see that there's a need for somebody else, you know, and it might not be our existing officials, for somebody to step in and say, look, we really need to change our tune. If we can't see that, it might be because we feel a little bit insecure about the things and the way that they're going. And that's a reflection of self that we need to fine tune before we can actually hear and communicate with someone who presents challenging conversational opportunities, such as potentially this one. This one might be a very challenging opportunity because for anyone to try and listen to something for even coming up on 1 minute in this era is quite difficult. And so I know that anyone who's listened, who has held on and listened for this almost 30 minutes of video, thank you so much. You can see that the clouds are coming in. It's causing a little bit of even more comfortable temperatures to come my way. Thank you so much. I wonder if it's going to rain again this evening. I mean, it has so far for pretty much every evening that I've been here. I also wonder what else we're going to see on this journey. I hope that you're wishing me those encounters that we know are positive and healthy and rewarding. That bear that came my way, it's possible there was someone that wanted me to have a surprise encounter that was not favorable. It's possible that there was so much will to have this thing happen to me that this thing did happen to me, and I did cross paths with something that could have been conceived of as a killer. But when I saw that bear, all I saw was, It's some of the local wildlife, and it made me so happy that it was there. When it snorted, I felt, well, it doesn't feel the same way that I do. However, I am so grateful that it is running in a direction opposite from me. Can you understand how grateful, how much joy there is for every day when we get through a circumstance? Now, what if it was a bear that was staring you down? Would you be happy afterwards and joyful? What if it wasn't just a stack of office papers or something that you had to file and submit to some other department? What if it wasn't just that phone call for the paperwork that got to wherever it was supposed to get to, and then for whatever reason you didn't get the ensuing whatever it was you sent off for? If all of these things that we're doing don't bring us joy, sometimes we just might want to look at, well, maybe I can take this one off the list. Maybe this doesn't go anywhere in my regular experiences file. At that point in time, once we recognize the core of health, and once we're just joyful about whatever gets sent our way, because there are a lot of people who are wishing a lot of things to a lot of people. And so once we get whatever's coming our way, if we can just amicably and peacefully say, this must be for this. For me, these are talking posts. All of the animals that I'm encountering and that I will encounter, and all of the experiences in terms of any of the circumstances that happen with the weather, those are all things for me to relate a story. See, here comes that shade again. So anyway, like I said, I want to keep these only at about a half hour. I know I've talked your ear off. I hope that the next video is more content from something other than just me, showing you my beautiful face and trying to smile and say, why don't you go ahead and click on the thumbs up, and asking for that without asking for it. If you listen to all of the humor in what I'm saying and just try to understand, I'm just trying to stay calm and relate a situation that I know is relatable. It's just that maybe I don't have the correct mix of relatives and friends in that 385 subscriber base yet. Maybe one of you are the key to helping to get the word out that there are some unusual things happening. There's this person who's really fixated on this subject. I'll call it passionate. There's someone who's really passionate about this subject, and they seem to be trying to tie wellness to this conservation aspect. And I don't know how it works, but he's got such ideas that it sure would be nice if he could talk to someone who works in X, Y, or Z, and I know that you work in X, Y, or Z. So anyway, point is, if I were you and I saw this cat talking down the road, I might line this cat down the road up with the cat up the road, and we'd be coming up with some smart and very sharp conversations that would help to bring about a little bit of an alertness to the situations that we are encountering. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and all that old school stuff.